Welcome everyone and welcome to the second part of this tutorial about importing a tank into Arma 3. So last time we prepared the hull and the turrets, we did the fire geometry, global cleanup and reviewing of the 3D model, and today we are going to focus more on the in-game import of the hull, the turrets, the two turrets we have. We will tackle them in this third part. And so today we're going to work mostly with Object Builder. We are going to use a lot Notepad and go back and forth in game to test and tweak the gameplay of the hull of this Crusader tank. So since last time I did a few tasks that were not interesting and that have been that you can find in my previous tutorial about importing from Blender. So I assign textures and materials to and RV mats to the different texture sets of every load. I redid the 40mm turret resolution loads. I gave some missing name selection on the antennas, and I prepared the PIP picture-in-picture setup inside the turret, so we will come back to this next time. So let's start and export this model into Object Builder. Okay, so here we are into Object Builder with the exported model. So the plan today is first to make the geometry loads. So we keep what we were doing on the last part. We start with this so you don't get lost. After this, we are doing all the loads: line contact, memory load. The hit points will be done at the very last. And in between, we will write the model config, so all the animations for this hull interior, and also the config export, so to be able to actually play it and add all gameplay functionalities to the hull. So let's start right away. So I have to find my fire geometry. It should be this. Yeah, okay. Fire geometry. This is geometry. Okay, geometry is this one. It's the same. So let's go geometry. Here I'm going to structure, convexity, component convex hull. If you have questions and you wonder what is the purpose of which this load or this load or this load, you can go to my other video, Blender to Arma complete export tutorial, where I explain everything. So this is fire geometry. Where is it? Fire geometry. So for the fire geometry, I have first two windows on my second screen, which are here the list of every penetration material that I can use in my tank. For standard to have a certain standardization, I use always the same for certain parts of every tanks. If I don't have any data, for example, so I have a consistent penetration behavior for the 20 tanks of Ironfront. You can see on the list that most are vanilla materials, so 1357 millimeters, and this 10 millimeter plate is defined in Ironfront, so you can create it by duplicating RVMat and BSurf files and edit them. Then you have the more thicker plates over there. The second window I have is the sketch of the Crusader armor. You can find this for almost any tank. So it's what I'm going to do now is to convert these values into armor in there, so the simulation is matching the real vehicle. For this, I have two ways to do. The first is to select multiple components with the select object, and the other is to go into select face, press shift and click, and it's going to select one component at a time. It's useful for catching some isolated components. So let's start first with the wheels. So you can't select in the named selection because, as you can see, it takes only the points, and you can't assign material to the points. You have to select the faces. I think there's an option over, so let's try the edit, select points from faces, then press E and paste here the material, and then you just have to hide it to keep on working, and you're good. Then I want to select the tracks, press E. For the tracks, I'm using 12mm armor plate, hide it. Then the side shields here, well, dust cover, hide. For this, I'm using for any tank 7mm. So it is not pierced by bullets or standard bullets, but it can be pierced by PTRD, anti-tank cannons, and armor piercing rounds. So again, a time lapse. I'm going to continue during this part to do this. So I'm assigning some armor values here to components. Keep hiding them as soon as they're done. And here, when doing the internal part of the skirt, I noticed that one component was not working because it had an empty triangle, this one here. So I went into Blender and fixed it in 2 goes because, yeah, it wasn't flat, so somehow the convex component function did not work correctly. So I flattened the faces and it went fine. So it's named, you have to be careful here when you do this. You want to delete empty, so it's named component 1 here, and in my vehicle it's named component 181. So I want to, before I delete it, retrieve the component name and name the one I have here component 81. If you have two eyes, the same component, it's going to fail and none of the two will have a proper hitbox. Okay, and you can't neither just paste it and regen the convex component, because when you are regenerating convex components, it erases the value of the material and the texture. So if you mass process the load, it's going to erase everything that you did just before, which is quite a pain in the ass, to be honest. But so let's go and fast forward again. Here I'm doing this for 20 minutes, so I only took a few parts of it. So it's always the same. Select the faces or the face you want to assign the material to. Press E, assign the material, and then hide with Ctrl H and proceed to the next one, and so on until you are done with the complete geometry. And so that's it. To have, in my opinion, and based on the vanilla systems only, is the way to reach a quite accurate armor simulation for a tank, armored car, or whatever other vehicle. So now let's proceed to the geometry, view geometry, geometry physics. The tracks were dead, so I remeshed them and re-imported them into Object Builder. I'm going to use this also as duplicate property as view geometry. It's the same, and I also need it as geometry physics, so phys here. So once you have the 4 geometry loads, the geometry you want to assign the mass of the vehicle. So for this you go to Google Crusader tank and look for mass. Oh, it's 20 tons. So 20,000, and you see that this is going to give some weight per vertex, and so I just want to tweak the later on I will do this once the turret is on. I will tweak the center of mass. The geometry physics, there is no weight to give, but you want to constraint z-axis and bring up the tracks about the bottom of the hull. We want to name the various components because when the engine is running, the physics calculation is going to look for the various parts, so the tracks and the hull. The names can be also changed in configs, but as a way I don't recommend you to do it, and so you have to name it track left for the left track, track R for the right track, and the rest, so the part of the hull that is going to collide with the ground has to be named slide, and those are required so the physics engine know what part just hit the ground, etc, etc. Shadow volume, you have one is detailed and one is complex, so you want to recheck for in Odoo. If you didn't do it, you want to recheck for topology find non-closed, so if it's not closed it won't leak and you will have no glitch. And don't forget to structure triangulate backward, press U to make sharp edges, and I took the habit to go into UV editor and delete any UV coordinate, just a reflex. I don't know if it's useful or not, but yeah, nothing is unclosed. When it's unclosed, you will have a red vertices which are going to be selected. So again, structure, triangulate, press U. Don't forget this, all those are needed for your shadow load. And also you want to check that you have no material and no texture assigned, as well as no hidden selection here, because it would assign the texture via config and lead to shadow glitches. Okay, so let's take the Trello card. There. No land contact. Land contact is quite simple, and it will be a good introduction to my workflow with memory points. So create a new load, properties, land contact, paste the tracks here, and I'm going to get rid of everything that is above ground level. So I am in point selection, vertex selection, and then I want to take the external and the middle one on the interior. It's how most of the tank's land contacts are done. I press Ctrl C, remove everything, and I have done my my land contact specific to the tanks in land contact slot. As opposite to the cars, you have no memory, you have no name selections on those points, so it's blank, just 6 points here, middle and the extremity, if I paste it here, of the tracks. Okay, now a bit more annoying next step, and I will use similar process, is to create the memory load. The memory load is going to be a bit more annoying because you have many memory points per wheel. So what you are going to do is to select the wheels with the name selections we did on the previous tutorial. So here I have all my wheels selected. I'm going to copy them and move them into the memory load. So that's the first step. Once I've done this, in the inherited config, if you are using Arma 3 configs from Vanilla game, the name selections here are used for model config animations. So technically the resolution load animes, but the physics calculation isn't using those. It's using, if we take the memory point from the flag panzer, it's using wheel 1 axis, wheel 1 bound, wheel 1 to axis bound, etc. So here it's very simple. It's the same naming standard as a car. So 1 is left and 2 is right. So wheel 2 something is to the right and wheel 1 something is to the left. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, etc. is the number of the wheel from the beginning. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9, etc. So I'm going to have fun by renaming all this. You can do it via a script. There are some scripts here and there, but they are not easy to find. The number of wheels on a tank is limited to 8 per side. If you have more than 8 wheels, so those here, you want to not declare those as wheels to save some number of wheels. So those are not going to be physics wheel, but they are defined in base tank. But it's not necessary. You can just ignore those and just have a classic animation as it's standardized and is present on other things. I'm doing it, but you can definitely not do it. Okay, so that's the naming standard, and now we are on the right side, so it's going to be wheel 2 1, wheel 2 and so on. Okay, so just going to duplicate this load to keep the naming, and now this thing is we have 2 memory points to declare per wheel. So we are taking one wheel and press Shift D, and it's going to merge it into the center. So it's going to give me the axis of each wheel. I'm going to fast forward too. So if you take these points and move them there, and here you have the center of every wheel. You just need that point, no need to have 2 points, since you can constrain the rotation axis. You don't have to declare the axis like this, for example. Now I want to declare those as axis, so I'm going to add axis to every name selection. Again, you can script this. I'm not doing it because the script is complex. It takes time to change the script, but one could have predefined scripts for his tanks and so on. I'm not doing it. Maybe because I like to suffer, but next time. Now we are going to repeat the process all over for the bound of each wheel. So we are going back to the edit cloud we did, to the save we did. And here we are going to retrieve only the bottom vertex of each wheel. So you see that vertex it doesn't exist. There are actually 4 vertices. So I'm going to select all 4 vertices of each wheel. This one has it. They are not all rotated the same. The same way. So those are going physics wheels. So I run the bottom bound. For the front and rear sprocket, it's a bit different because you don't want them here to hit the ground and prevent this to have the dampen effect. So on front and rear sprockets, you're going to select the extremity of the wheel. So this is the rear sprocket. I'm going to select the very rear vertex. Creating again a new load, pasting this, and as I did before, so you see I have a U shape of with the extremity of every wheel. I'm going to select each group and press Shift D to have the center. What is important when you do this is to have a balanced number of vertices, so it's actually the center and not a fake center, so to say. And so if you paste it there, you see that it's the exact bottom of the axis, which is in the middle here, and it's for the front and rear, it's going to be up front here, up rear on the rear sprocket. Still simple at this point. So we are going in there, and we are going to name them wheel 11, etc. bound. And same as the other one, I'm going to apply this to all seconds. Okay, take it and bring it into the memory load, and I can delete my form load. The bounds here, you want to take them, move them, and have them at the track level. So you just constrain the z-axis and move them down. Reason for this is that you don't want the tracks to be inside the ground. Okay, next one. We already have the most important of the memory load, because the big work on tanks is physics, the rest is very easy. Now I want to insert a new point, which is going to be the shit. Okay, actually I'm going to paste it from the other tank. It's named Zamerny, and it's used for inventory interaction. So we want it to be centered, quite simple, above mans 8. So your inventory interaction is in the middle of the tank. Next one are going to be first the dumper axis. The dumper axis is the center axis that is going to tell on what axis are your wheels going to move. So if you have something not straight, your wheels would dampen like this instead of like this, or like this. Yeah. So for this, it's simple. You are going into the memory load again. Everything is inside the memory load. Yes, you can create a box, press Shift D, it's going to be centered. Name it here damper axis. All the naming can be modified. It's going to be used in the model.cfg, so it's not always that name that you will find in every model. I don't even know if this is the standard name, but it should be. And once you have done this, here you want to copy paste the point. Did I copy paste it? I don't know. Okay, and just bring it here. And so there's a rule about this one. It must not be above the geometry center, the center of mastery. So this is the main setup for physics, not the harmony, but damper and wheels. Then all that we are going to add now is going to not influence the physics, but more the gameplay, because we did the physics part is done. So next point we want to have is like, where am I going to be able to climb inside the tank? Where are the dust effect of the tracks going to appear? What are the axes of the various hatches I have on my tank? If I have here, I don't have a hull machine gun, but I could have some memory points to define for this. Here not, but we will do it for the turret in the next tutorial. Where is my main headlight going to appear, and what direction should it have? Things like this. All the axes you need or memory point that the game is going to use to make something appear once in game. So if you want, for example, here, where am I going to spawn the exhaust effect as well? So all quality of life stuff, so your tank will look better and nicer. I'm going to start with one that I name Engine Smoke. It's in Ironfront, it's used to tell the game where is the effect spawning when the engine is blown up. So the tank is still alive, the crew is alive, but the tank won't be able to move or anything. So it's just above the engine block, and it's named Engine Smoke, and it's just used in config. We'll see it later. Then I want to spawn at the rear the effects for the tracks. So I'm going to use those 2 points here. I'm going there. I delete the name selection, and I'm going to duplicate them, move them just like this, so you have the starting point of the effect and the ending point, or the direction point of it. You need the 2 points to be there, just moving them a bit. And here I have to decide the offset I want, so maybe let's move them below, just right there. Okay. And the names of those, it's still dynamic, so it's not forced to use those names. You have dust front and dust back, so this is dust back, and I will add dust front after. Oh, it was only 1 point. I did a mistake. So let's go. Let's do this. Dust back left, new dust back, right. Going to bring them here, and memory, oops, here, and this is going to be dust front left and dust front right. When I'm doing them, usually I'm copy pasting them from the tank and I just adjust their position. Here I'm doing it completely from as much as I can from scratch, so you can see the whole process. You see here it's inside. I don't want it to be inside, so I'm going to scale it. I think that's there. It wasn't. Okay. I'm just using the scale to have them offset of the same distance, so this is symmetrical. Okay, so this is my front dust. So I'm bringing them inside the memory. So you see it's already getting complex, because you can think that these memory points, just by watching, are bound to the wheels, but they are not. They are just gameplay memory points and nothing else. Next, we're going to add the exhaust, and to ease up the process, I'm going to retrieve the piece I'm interested in there. Come here, okay, and move it to my work edit load, and there I'm selecting the outer ridge only, not the rest. Press Shift D to have the center, delete the rest of points. So here I have my center point. I can keep this just to have the axis I want, like this, and delete. And this is going to be exhaust pos for position. Shit, I have to redefine it. And the second one is going to be exhaust dir for direction. So where it spawns, where it goes. It's quite simple. And I'm going with this to the memory load. So the next steps, I guess, is going to be the more. Okay, I have the lights to animate. So which one? I think the main headlight is this one, and this looks to be the night lights. But we are going to use both. So for this, I want to here select this, and it's always the same. I'm going to copy paste it because I worked on the effect angle, which is good, and I don't want to lose it. So it's about, I would say, 1.50 m distance with 15 degrees angle to the bottom, to have something that goes quite far but not too much. You can see there. So I've made end light and there, and I'm going to copy paste, and here I'm concentrating in x-axis, z-axis here. We're selecting this and have it something that match, and I'm going to move them to my edit load again. And so I add main headlight, and this is why it's dynamic, because you don't really care. I can name it L or I can name it 1, I don't care. It's going to be defined inside the config. So nothing static here. Define, and this one is going to be new main headlight right, and new main headlight right here. moving them to the memory load. Okay, now I want to have the where my crew is going to mount inside the tank. So I have driver, gunner, commander. So you see I'm going to move them from the Panzer IV, but it's always the same process. You just have to create the memory points. It's quite simple. And here I'm going to move them at the ground level and quite closer to the tank, there and there, and in the middle. They are not in the middle at the moment. So you would climb by the sides here. Right there. So this is where the direction. It's to give the direction again where you are going to have the interaction and where your character is going to, the animation is going to trigger towards this direction. Now we are going to do the driver axes. So we have various axes here. We have get to this view here. We have the two hatches that are there and there. So those you want to give them an axis by selecting the physical axis. And then we have, is it an axis here? It looks like, yep. So I have my axis here. Okay, and then I have multiple axes here. One there for the shield, and one right there for the door. It's in actually this is in two parts, one part, two parts. I'm going there and there, pasting. No, not there. There. Okay, before I convert this into axis, I want to check the names of the various parts. So I have driver H11 and 12. So I want to name those new driver 1 H11, driver 1 H12. Okay. Then I have port 1, which is the shield, and port 2, which is the actual door. So I think this was converted port 1. Okay, so this is new port 2. You'll see why I'm doing this in a moment. And I'm going to add the underscore axis to all of those, because you don't want it to have the same name selection as the parts they are going to animate, because they would move with the animation otherwise. And now I'm going to turn this again with Shift D. That's why I'm doing it in O2, because it's quite simple to use actually. I'm just going to turn this into axis. The only specific one are the weird ones, because you see, if I select this, it's going to give me this point, and if I select just this, it's closer to the actual center. Oops. This and this. Okay, and now I just have to move this to the memory load. So I'm going to call for all those name selections when I'm done for animations. Oh yeah, I forgot this. This is named the view pilot. So the view pilot is where when you press right click, you're going to, as the pilot, you're going to trigger the optic model. If an optic is defined, you can define an empty optic, so there is nothing on the screen but the 3D environment. And with the name selection, the memory point I'm just created here, I'm going to name it driver view. It's going to tell the game where your view is going to be set when you press the right click button as driver. You have the same for gunner, commander, and so on. You just have to define them in configs. Now we're going to move to the model config. So how is it working? How is our setup done in Ironfront? First, the generality. You have to grab this. You have multiple in the model config. You have important values, which are type. Is it going to be translation or rotation? Mostly. The source, it's the controller. The source address is how it's going to react or act. It's a loop, a clamp for the main. Selection is the name selection. Axis is the axis. Minimum value is between 0 and 1. Angle in radian. Memory, you want to keep it to 1 most of the time. It's never used 0. And you have, depending on the, if you have a rotation, you have the angle. If you have the height type, you have the height value and end height value. And if you have a translation, you have offset 0, offset 1, which is offset at value equals 0, and offset 1 when max value is reached. How does a source animation source works is quite simple. You have to imagine if you had the solar system. So this is the sun. Woo. And you want the Earth to rotate around the sun. So you're going to define a rotation with here the sun axis. So this will be sun axis. So you're going to define the Earth as name selection. And tell I want Earth to rotate around sun axis on source. The source would be Earth's rotation, for example. Now, if you have a second planet, let's say we have Mars, and Mars is rotating around the sun on another axis as the Earth, so it could be like rotating like this. We don't really care. You're going to tell Mars is rotating around the sun, but yeah, it has a different axis. Like it could rotate around this axis here. So you would have sun axis number 2. And now, if I want to, and the source would be Mars rotation. And in my config, I would write this, and the game would, under certain conditions, or it would run those two sources, and the Earth could rotate independently from Mars. Now, if I want the two rotations to happen in the same time and have a normal solar system, I'm going to have a last of our, let's say, another source, which is going to be source solar, but it's going to have two classes. So you will have the first rotation, so Earth rotation, and you would have Mars rotation, and all this would be controlled by the same controller here, but you would keep the two values. So it works like this. If I have here, there are wheels that have the exact same rotation, but if you look, I have the wheel left rotation source, and all the color to the wheels are inheriting from colo left one with the same values. So this is inheritance. It means, basically, it means that everything here exists. You don't have to rewrite it. And if you write it, it's okay, it will work. If you remove it by commenting, it's going to work as well because you are inheriting. If I want here to change rotation Y, it's going to overwrite the value of the mother class or father class, I don't know, of the parent class. And if I don't change it, it's going to inherit by itself. If I set the same, it's useless because it's already inheriting. You don't have necessarily to write it. So what is said here is that colo left one is going to have a rotation constraint in X. Under the source wheel left, it's going to concern selection colo left one on an axis, which is undefined, but it's by default the center of the bounding box of the selection. Memory is 0, source address is loop. It means it's going to rotate indefinitely under its own axis, and it's not going to reset or stop as it would be with clamp. Minimum value is 0 and 1. Much of animations in ARMA are between 0 and 1, and the angle is going to be 0 at start, minus 360 at end, looped, so it's going to turn and turn and turn until the source is going to stop. And since you have inheritance, it's going to apply the very same thing to all left wheels, and so all left wheels are under wheel left animation source. Now if you want to check the animation sources, you go to DIWiki, which which at least here is complete. So it explains you all the system, everything is explained, and you can find here the all the animation sources that are supported by default inside model config. If the model config is not listed here, you're going to have to create a new one inside your vehicle config. So it can be something very specific, a new script, a door, like the ramp of the landing craft are using a user action that is triggering a custom animation source that is listed here as source equal user. The last thing that you need to know is that the selection here is going to refer to a named selection inside the model, and so you have to declare them in the model config. The way to do this is to list them. And how does it work? You declare one class, and this is the inheritance. So path offset L, if you remember from part 1, is the name of the track and where the track texture is going to move to simulate that it's moving. It's bound to nothing. Same for the right. This we'll ignore and talk about it later, but now the wheels, they are bound to nothing. None of them is bound. But oh, there's a it should be in the other, it should be the other way. It's not, it's weird that it doesn't say anything. In fact, when you are using a class in the second part here, it has to be used, it has to be declared the ones before. So pod colo is the bottom part of the track, and NatColo is the top part, and these are going to be used for the dampers. And so if PodColo is going to move back and down to follow the ground, you want the top of the on a Christie track system, you want the top to follow it, so they are bound. So this way you just define the animation of PodColo, and this one is going to follow up the same animation. For example, if we go inside the model, and let's say we have NatColo left one here. If it's not bound and the PodColo is moving, PodColo is going to do this when it's going to move, and it's bound via animation. It is bound to the wheel, so it's going even to do this Colo left one. It's going, where are you? It's going, oh, stop joking. Okay, so it's going to do this, but the NatColo isn't going to follow. This is what you want when you have a Vickers track system with upper sprocket, but if you don't, you want the NatColo to follow the whole system. And so you bound everything via the model config, via the skeleton. You bound everything, so when your tank is going to fall into a hole, it's going to, everything is going to remain bound. So that's the utility. And for example, if I get down, the turrets are not defined in the base classes. If I go to my Flak Panzer, for example, it's a bit more messy because those are the Panzer 4. You can see, for example, that Poklop are the hatches, and hatches are bound to the turret, which is Autogvez. It means that if you don't bind it, if you do this, the turret is going to rotate and the hatch is going to remain in place in space, so it's not going to remain at its location where it should be. If you bound them and then you animate Podclop loader one, it's going to remain at its place and keep being animated based on its new position in the 3D space. We'll do a bit of demonstration if I think about it, or I have an opportunity to edit it. So here for Iron Front we have two setups, which are the Vickers. To revert just my chance here. We have the Vickers, which is the upper sprocket. So you see that you have one skeleton bone, and for the Christie, which is what we are going to use, we have another one. So I wrote this in order to have inheritance for all tanks, and I don't have to redeclare it for every vehicle, because here you see the skeleton inherit. When I'm going to write my model config right now for the Crusader, and you see that my skeleton inherit is here on the Panzer 4. Is going to inherit from the Vickers skeleton because it's a Vickers track system. If it was a Christie, I would just have Christie, and I don't have to redeclare all that we just talked about. It's just here about specifics of the tank, like turret, gun, blah blah blah. And even more specific here on the Flak Panzer, it uses the Panzer 4 skeleton, and on top of it I have a specific skeleton just for the flak gun, which is mounted on the turret. And so you have the same system for the Christie and Vickers animations here. So this is the track destruction system that you have in Iron Front that is inherited. And otherwise, I'm using, you see, the same animation. I don't redeclare anything. I just change the selection of some values here, but the animations themselves are not changed between the two versions of the tank, because you have this animation parent of animations in World War II Christie. And I inherit from sections and inherit from, I have a skeleton, but the skeleton doesn't inherit. But it allows me to have the animations here defined on the skeleton of the Christie, and I'm reusing them on another skeleton here. I'm not reusing the skeleton of the Christie. So you can find all of this, not in this setup, but in a similar setup in Arma 3 samples. So feel free to use them. And on top of it, I kept the Arma 3 standard of naming, which means that all the words I'm using at the moment, all the selection naming I'm using at the moment, you will refine them in Arma 3 samples. The last part is sections. Sections is going to be hidden selections and everything that is going to change texture. So main headlight is going to change, because when you are lighting up the light, it's going to create a glowing effect. Fuel it, and main gun it are going to show up damages on the vehicle when it's damaged or destroyed, and wheels and hide are for track destruction system. But in tanks you then have camo 1, blah blah blah, that you may already have encountered if you did some retextures, and that's declared in this place. So when a model can be retextured, it's because the model didn't declare the hidden selection in there as a section. So that's it pretty much for the base structure of model.cfg. It's actually, if you did config, it's really working the same way, except the skeletons, that is a bit tricky at the beginning when you start to learn it, but it's quite okay. I want there to include World War II Crusader and them there. So I'm going to retrieve this. And you see we are going to rewrite them, because the Flag Panzer is complex and it has inheritance from, or it has relics of old war damage system and so on, so we don't keep it. So I have my base model.cfg on the right side, and I have my Crusader on the left. So I'm going to delete the Flag Panzer animations. I don't want them. I'm going to bring that to there. You'll see the changes very soon. I'm going to delete all this. I'm going to delete this. Going to delete everything in there. Actually, I'm just going to keep one rotation. Let's start from scratch. Here the class is the name of your 3D model. Otherwise it's not going to match. It's not going to find the model where it has to be applied. And I want to have a Christie system, so I'm inheriting from World War II Christie. So the include is going, when the CP file is going to be compiled, this is going to be moved there by the compiler, and all the inheritance is going to work. The bones now, I want to rename this Crusader Bones. Remove the Flag Panzer again. Okay, and we are going to kill this. and we are inheriting from a Christie skeleton. Okay, so now can I do this? Okay, it's a bit there's not much space, but we're going to try to do it this way. We're starting with the bones. So the base structure is this, so I'm going to make a lot of them. And so let's start with the first name selection. So this is bound to the hull, so there is no inheritance. It's going to remain here. 2. And here is the port. 1, 2, 3. Okay, here there is already one inheritance. Why? Because, can you see me? Okay. Show me the 3D. If you like at port 2, it's going to rotate like to the exterior, and port 1 is going to follow it. So I want the port 1 here to be bound to port 2. So I'm declaring first port 2, and port 1 is going to be either bound to port 2, and port 3 is not bound to anything. We will demonstrate here the fact that if it's not bound, this is going to remain in place. This would remain in place, and this would rotate, which is wrong. Then I have dust cover hide. These are just cosmetic animations, but we are going to declare them bound to the hull or bound to nothing. So they are going to follow the vehicle movement, the center of the vehicle anyway. Hull it is the section, so we are going to paste it here. It's going to show up the damages done to the tank. Then we have all the wheels, but the wheels there and everything here is defined already inside the base class, so we don't have anything to do here but inheriting, and we inherit from Christie skeleton. I'm not going to re-explain, but all is defined here already. The tracks are there, the tracks, the wheels, and so on. No problem. We are happy. And so just doing this is going to enable the system. And why? Because as I inherit and all is already written, and you can do the same by inheriting, by copy pasting RPath3 sample or extracting with EliteNess a model config from another tank. If your model is up to standard, it's automatically going to work on a predefined model config. You just have to change this and keep the inheritance right, have the standard naming, and just here by not doing anything, we should be able, if we start Bulldozer, which is going to take a while, so I'm going to make it go faster. With the startup trick. Okay, so here's the model. You see that my material are applied because you can see the normal map here. Here, you see it well. Okay, so we want to check what's the yeah, nothing is happening. 1 sec. Why? I didn't here, you see I forgot to give the skeleton. There. Just to reload it, you just go inside I don't know, the memory load, go back to load 1. It's going to recompute the animations. Okay, now I have it. So damper is the source of the damping of the wheels when they hit the ground. So this is working. You can even move here and see that the top part is bound to the bottom part. Hit track isn't set up yet. Wheels left. You see the wheels are rotating. So working. Wheel right is the same. They are all turning. And damper. Okay, for now we have only this working. We want to define the animations for all those little hatches for the driver. And yes, it's going to be all for the hull. It's not as impressive as it is. And yes, I want to define the height system for our little friend, the side plate. So we get back here, and here we are going to have the driver hatch 1 rotation. I want just to keep the naming standard, so I'm going to rename it, but in absolute you don't have to bother with this. You can set up whatever you want. Just I want to keep the standard, so when I read it I'm not lost. So we are going here to define. So here you just do it this way. I mean, you go inside the model config that already exists, retrieve a rotation, you copy the content, paste it, and you see that the minimum value is 0. Why isn't it 0? Oh, that's weird. I think that's the stupid value. The axis is what we defined in memory load. So it's going to be driver 1 axis, driver 1. Selection is going to be this minus axis, and source is hatch driver. You can see that here, if you look for hatch, you have those are already supported by ARMA, hatch commander, hatch driver, hatch gunner. If you want to have more, you have to define see what kind of proxy is placed. If that's a loader or a machine gunner, is going to be gunner proxies. So you have a hatch gunner source, and then you will call the animation name inside the config, so it triggers the right hatch. So it is hatch driver rotation X. So if I save now, let's do the second one. I can here do the inheritance, call it 1, 2, keep the same, change this, and change this, and change the value to the opposite. So this is a quite simple inheritance. And now if I get back into Bulldozer, go away. Hatch driver rotate type. It's all go away. This is how you end up restarting this crap. So you want to avoid to restart Bulldozer as much as possible because it just takes a while to load. I found this trick is to start Arma 3 tools from Steam. It's going to make the computation quicker, otherwise it can take up to 5 minutes. And so AltDriver has appeared here. I'm navigating with Enter and Backscape, and you see that the animation are triggered. It's a bit specific, but here you see that the rotation goes the wrong way, and it's absolutely normal because once in game, for some reason, the angles are reverted. It's don't ask any question, it's just Arma, you know. So when you do the hatches, you just do them in Bulldozer with the proper angles, and before you compile the file, you reverse the values there. So let's see, this should be a bit less, and this should be more like 270. It's too much. 250. Actually, this is going to hit the turret, so I will have to get there. Let's see. What do you think of this? Shit, I'm using the... Okay. So we're going to log this a bit above 90 degrees. Let's put 110 so it doesn't collide with the turret. You see, I want this to actually end up on the so 200. Hello. More, 10 more, 15 more. I'm going to prepare the other hatches. So this is going to be the turn in and turn out, because it's bound to hatch driver, so it's bound to the default mouse wheel menu. But if I want to animate those 3 parts here, I have to use different something is going to be wrong here. We have to fix this. I will have to use different animation sources. So the first one is going to use the same constraint, which is rotation axis X. port 1 rotate, selection, axis, angle is 90, 100 and let's see, 120 first. Oh no, it's yeah, it's going to be downward. Forgot to do this. It's going to be downward, so this is this. And just the source is going to be how did I set that up in the okay, same name as the so this is going to call the in animation source inside the config. So we'll get back to this after we wrote the current model config. And there is going to we're going to change the airport 122 to 12. So the number 2 is this one, so the constraint is going to be the same as the turret, so it's main turret Y, rotation Y, and here we're going to put 100 degrees. You see that the source is different, so it will be another animation. And the last one is 1.3. Is going to keep the right rotation. And it's going to rotate upwards by 90 degrees. Okay, let's try all this. So we have the hatch, which is playing the wrong way because I changed it now. Then you have the driver port, so okay, it must get done much more, like 45. And see, now if I'm moving the port 2, see here I have already have an issue. So you have multiple possibilities. First, let's check the angle. It's a bit high. Let's set 15. We have multiple possibilities. Well, number one, the part which is not moving here, this one, is not bound to the name selection, which should be the case here. Or number two, it's a name selection that is not bound by the skeleton, because if you get back here and do what I told you right before, remove the inheritance, and if I get back and rebuild it, we'll see that the wall isn't going to follow up. And so yeah, I don't, why is that? Does it mean that it's wrong there too? Of course it is. So we're back here. If you look at number one, it's going to go down, no problem here. Okay, I hate this software, for fuck's sake. sometimes it runs into compilation problems, and when you move the controller with the mouse wheel, it's going to change the running animation. So here you see, okay, it didn't rebuild the skeleton actually. Awesome. So we have to, here there's an issue as well. Look, some faces are not following the name selection, so it's me, I did the mistake. But the angle is okay, here angle is okay, and let's use this to check if the angle is okay here. So I have some fixes to do on the 3D again.
3 hours later.
I forgot to discover hide. So it's hide. It's a simple hide animation. With the hide shield name selections, that is going to be defined in animation sources in config, and that's it. So it can be disappeared in virtual garage. Edge gunner rotate, we don't care. Okay, hide shield, no, it's going to hide those. The its track is going, you see, it hides the track itself. And then by proxy system I replace it by detract wheels system. It's easy to make it work. So we are trying to, yes, this. So this is working okay. Just going to revert the angle. Driver 1 minus 45. Number 2. Okay, so here you see that I did the change in the skeleton, so now the whole hatch is rotating, no problem with this, but the central hatch isn't following, so I'm going to uncomment this line to fix it. And parts number 3 there. Okay. So as driver, you can hide this to have the viewports, and you will have the right click to have this view pretty much. Then you can open the wall with this, is the central part is going to follow, but you see it, you can open this. Those two are going to be bound via config because it's useless to open the pistol port independently. So let's conclude. I decided to shortcut the video to this point because first it was quite long already, 1 hour 20, and also because when recording the video I wasn't very smooth on while working on config and physics, and I encountered a lot of issues, so I want to re-record this part to make it more fluent. I was also quite tired after more than 3 hours of continuous recording and explaining and so on. So this is the result I had at the very end. So it wasn't playable more than this, the speed was wrong and so on. So we will in the next part we will add the turret so the two turrets that come with this hull, and we will finally tweak the config, gameplay and physics in the very last part, in the fourth part. So I hope you enjoyed and that the review was complete. Don't forget to use BIWiki and Arma 3 samples, as well as EliteNest, to extract model configs from other vehicles, because you can read the configs from others. There are also some tools online made by TD to unbinarize a model legally and be able to use it as an educational sample. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and see you for part 3 very soon. Bye bye.